Story 1. We moved into the old house on Miller's Lane in 2018, just after my grandfather passed. My mom inherited it, and it was a mess. The house itself wasn't ancient, built in the late 70s, but it felt like time had forgotten it. It sat on a surprisingly large plot of land for being so close to town, about an acre, mostly overgrown garden and tall, untamed hedges. On one side, it bordered an abandoned, dilapidated shed that everyone in the neighborhood called the Shroud. No one ever went near it. The Shroud was a truly unsettling sight. It leaned precariously, its roof caved in on one side, planks missing from its walls like rotting teeth. The wood was a faded, sickly green, and what was left of the windows were just empty black holes. Vines with thick, woody stems had completely consumed one entire side, pulling it deeper into the ground. A heavy, rusted padlock hung uselessly from a broken latch on its only door, which was warped and seemed to breathe in the wind. The air around it always felt colder, even on the hottest summer days, and it had a faint, metallic smell like old blood and damp earth. The neighbors told us stories about the Shroud, whispers of strange noises late at night, a faint, rhythmic thumping that carried on the breeze, even fleeting shadows glimpsed, darting between the trees that bordered the back of the property. They said a recluse named Elias Thorne had lived there, a man who rarely spoke and was rumored to dabble in dark arts. He vanished without a trace in the early 90s, and the shed, along with a small, forgotten portion of his property, had simply been left behind, untouched. My mom, bless her heart, was oblivious to the local legends. She saw potential. She spent hours in the overgrown garden, trying to tame the wild roses and pull out the stubborn weeds that had grown taller than me. She even talked about trying to fix up the Shroud, maybe turn it into a workshop. I'd just shudder. I was 14 when we moved in, and already I felt a prickling unease whenever I was in the backyard, especially after dusk. The air grew heavy, and the shadows from the towering hedges seemed to stretch and writhe. It was a constant, low-level hum of dread. One evening, I was sitting on our back porch swing, trying to read by the dim glow of the outdoor light. The night was still, almost too still, and the usual chorus of crickets and distant traffic was eerily absent. Then I heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from the Shroud. It was rhythmic, like something dragging its nails across wood, but too slow, too deliberate for an animal. My heart started to pound. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind or a branch.
The scratching continued, a little louder now, and I swore I could hear a soft, almost imperceptible thump after each scratch, as if whatever was scratching was also shifting its weight. My eyes were glued to the Shroud, a dark, hulking silhouette against the faint moonlight. I gripped the arms of the swing, my knuckles white. Then, the scratching stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise. I held my breath, straining to hear anything, to see anything. And that's when I saw it, a flicker of movement in one of the dark, empty window frames of the Shroud. Just for a split second, a pale, almost translucent shape. It looked like a hand, long and skeletal, reaching out from the darkness within, then quickly retracting. I gasped, a small, choked sound. My blood ran cold. I bolted from the swing, ran inside and slammed the back door shut, fumbling with the locks. I didn't tell my mom. She would have just laughed it off, told me it was my imagination or a trick of the light. But I knew what I saw, and I knew, deep down, that Elias Thorne's shed was not empty. Story 2. My best friend Sarah lived a few blocks away, and our usual hangout spot was the abandoned playground behind the old elementary school. It was surrounded by dense woods, and the rusty swings groaned in the wind. A perfect backdrop for our ghost stories. One day, while we were trying to see who could get the highest on the teeter-totter, Sarah brought up the stories about the old crumbling farmhouse on Elm Street. Everyone in town knew about it. It had been empty for decades, ever since the Miller family left back in the 60s. The story went that old Mr. Miller, a quiet, stern man, had simply walked out one night and was never seen again. His wife, a frail woman named Eleanor, stayed for a few more years, growing increasingly reclusive before she too vanished. The house sat there, decaying, a silent monument to their unexplained departures. The windows were boarded up, but the boards were rotting, revealing glimpses of darkness within. The paint peeled like sunburnt skin, and the porch sagged like it was about to give way. The yard was a jungle of thorny bushes and dead trees, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. Kids dared each other to go near it, but no one ever actually went inside. Until Sarah got the bright idea. "Let's go to the Miller house tonight," she whispered, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "Just to the porch. We don't have to go in." I hesitated. I'd heard enough whispers about that place. Strange lights, disembodied whispers, the chilling sensation of being watched. But Sarah was always the braver one, and I didn't want to seem like a coward. "Fine," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "But we leave if anything feels off." That night, under a thin crescent moon, we biked to Elm Street. The air grew colder the closer we got, and a thick fog seemed to materialize from nowhere, clinging to the ground like a shroud. The Miller house loomed ahead, darker and more menacing than in daylight. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the frantic pounding of my own heart. As we approached the front porch, a faint, almost imperceptible thump came from inside. We froze. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Sarah nodded, her face pale in the dim light. Another thump, louder this time, and then a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across a wooden floor. We looked at each other, our eyes wide with terror. Every fiber of my being screamed to run. But then, a low, guttural moan echoed from within the house, a sound that seemed to crawl under my skin and settle in my bones. It was a sound of deep, unending sorrow, laced with something ancient and malevolent. Sarah grabbed my arm, her grip like a vice. "Let's go," she croaked, her voice trembling. We didn't need to be told twice. We turned and ran, not stopping until we were far from Elm Street, our lungs burning, the chilling moans still ringing in our ears. We never spoke of the Miller house again, not really. But every time I passed it, even years later, I felt that lingering chill, that sense of something unspeakable trapped within its decaying walls. Story 3. My senior year of high school, a few friends and I got jobs at the Scream Shack, a seasonal Halloween haunted house that popped up every October in an old abandoned warehouse district on the edge of town. It was a massive place, full of dusty corners, flickering lights, and the persistent smell of damp concrete and cheap fog machine fluid. Most of us just saw it as easy money and a way to hang out. The Scream Shack was known for its elaborate sets and for being genuinely terrifying. We had actors dressed as clowns, zombies, and various grotesque monsters, all trained to jump out and scare the living daylights out of people. But there was one section, right at the back, past the carnival of corpses and before the chamber of shadows, that was always different. It was called the asylum. The asylum was designed to look like a decaying mental institution. The walls were peeling, covered in fake blood stains and scratch marks. Mannequins in straitjackets hung from the ceiling, and distorted, looping audio of screams and whispers played constantly. Our boss, a gruff but generally good-natured guy named Frank, had always said he hated that section. He claimed the energy in there was bad, even for a haunted house. He told us to never, under any circumstances, go into the asylum alone after closing. We all thought he was just trying to build up the spook factor for us, the employees. One night, after a particularly busy shift, everyone was exhausted. It was well past midnight, and the last of the customers had long since left. We were cleaning up, putting props away, and getting ready to head home. My friend Mark, who was usually fearless, was assigned to check the asylum one last time for any forgotten props or misplaced costumes. He grumbled, but eventually went in. About 5 minutes later, we heard it. Not a scream, not a yell, just a sudden, sharp, metallic clang that echoed through the vast warehouse, followed by an abrupt, absolute silence. My heart jumped into my throat. Frank, who had been bagging trash, dropped everything. His face went white. "Mark!" he yelled, his voice tight with an unfamiliar fear. No answer. We rushed to the asylum entrance. The heavy rusted steel door was slightly ajar, just as Mark would have left it. But the darkness inside felt different, thicker, almost suffocating. The usual creepy audio was gone, replaced by an unsettling quiet. Frank pushed the door open wider, and we peered in, our flashlights cutting weak beams through the gloom. "Mark!" I called out, my voice trembling. Still nothing. We started walking slowly, cautiously, into the section. The mannequins seemed to stare.
Mark was lying on the floor, curled into a fetal position, his eyes wide open and staring blankly at the ceiling. His face was contorted in a silent scream. Pure, unadulterated terror etched into every feature. His hands were clasped over his ears, and he was rocking gently, almost imperceptibly, back and forth. There was a large, rusty metal pipe, one of the props from the asylum, lying a few feet away from him, as if it had been thrown. We tried to talk to him, to shake him, but he was unresponsive. He just lay there, eyes fixed, whimpering softly now, a low, constant drone that was more unsettling than any scream. Frank called an ambulance immediately. Mark spent a week in the hospital. The doctors said he had suffered a severe psychological breakdown, a temporary catatonic state brought on by extreme shock. He never spoke about what happened in the asylum. Not to us, not to his family, not even to the therapists. He just kept repeating two words, over and over, whenever anyone pressed him. The whisper. Frank closed the Scream Shack for good after that. He said it wasn't worth it. And to this day, whenever I hear a soft, disembodied whisper when I'm alone, especially late at night, I remember Mark's face, and I can almost feel the chilling presence of whatever he encountered in the asylum.